She ran because the alternative was a slow death disguised as duty. That night, believing she had one final card to play before her freedom was stolen forever, she discovered the most dangerous truth of all. Her carefully constructed plan, the escape route she'd spent months building, the allies she'd trusted with her life, all of it had been a beautiful lie designed to destroy her completely. Desperate, cornered, and with the wolves of her own pack closing in, she did something unforgivable. She sold herself to an enemy alpha, the one wolf her father had warned her never to approach, the rogue king who answered to no pack and no law. She never imagined that in offering her freedom as payment, she was handing her soul to the only wolf in existence who had been searching for her across 3 territories and 7 years. The decision to trade herself hadn't been born of courage. It had been born of pure survival instinct. Sera stood at the edge of the cliff overlook, her fingers gripping the cold stone railing until her knuckles went white. The valley spread below her like a living map, the township of Greymore nestled in the basin, smoke curling from chimneys in the early evening light. Somewhere down there, in the council hall, her father was finalizing the contract that would end her life as she knew it. 48 hours. 2 days until Alpha Donovan of the Ironwood Pack would arrive to claim her as his bound mate, his treaty bride, the seal on an alliance that would merge Graymore's farmlands with Ironwood's military might. The thought made her stomach turn violently. She had met Donovan once, 3 months ago, during the initial negotiations. He was older, not obscenely so, but his eyes had been wrong. Cold. Calculating. The way he'd looked at her hadn't been the way a mate looked at his other half. It had been the way a general surveyed a strategic asset. And when her father had left them alone for precisely 10 minutes, as tradition demanded, Donovan had leaned close enough that she could smell the tobacco on his breath and whispered, "Your wolf is strong." Good. I need strong bloodlines for my heirs. After the 3rd son, you can retire to the country estate. Alone, of course. I have other arrangements for my own comfort. The memory still made her skin crawl. Sera closed her eyes, forcing herself to breathe through the rising panic. You don't have to do this, she whispered to herself, the same words she'd been repeating for weeks. Maya has a plan. Trust Maya. Trust the plan. Maya. Her closest friend since childhood, the only wolf in Greymore who truly understood what it meant to feel trapped by pack politics. Maya, whose older brother had connections in the Wayward Hollows, the neutral territory where rogues and packless wolves gathered. Maya had promised her a way out. An escort who would meet Sera at the old mining road at midnight, someone who could get her past the border patrols and into Hollowlands before anyone realized she was gone. Once there, Sera would be untouchable. Pack law didn't extend to the Hollows. She would be free. 2 hours, Sera murmured, checking the position of the sun. It was sinking fast, painting the sky in shades of amber and blood orange. In 2 hours, the guard rotation would shift. Her father would be in the council hall until well past midnight, arguing over trade percentages and territorial boundaries with the Ironwood delegation that had arrived early to, as they put it, ensure the bride didn't get cold feet. The irony was suffocating. Sera turned from the overlook and made her way back through the forest path toward the family estate. Her heart hammered against her ribs with every step, adrenaline making her hypersensitive to every sound. The crunch of leaves beneath her boots seemed deafening. The distant call of a crow made her flinch. She couldn't afford to be seen. Couldn't afford suspicion. She'd told her father she needed air, needed to clear her head before the ceremony preparations began in earnest tomorrow. He'd believed her, or at least pretended to, his attention already consumed by political maneuvering. The estate loomed ahead, its stone walls dark against the dimming sky. Sera slipped through the servants' entrance, keeping her hood low, her footsteps silent on the old wooden floors. Her chambers were in the east wing, overlooking the gardens. She had maybe an hour before her lady's maid would come to help her dress for dinner, the formal affair where she was expected to smile and nod while Ironwood's representatives toasted to the alliance and her father counted his future profits. She wasn't going to be there. Inside her chambers, Sera moved with practiced efficiency. The travel pack was already hidden beneath her bed, stuffed with essentials she'd been smuggling in for weeks. Dried meat, water skins, a change of clothes, the small dagger her mother had given her before she died, and the leather pouch containing every piece of silver and gold she'd managed to collect. It wasn't much, barely enough to survive a month, but it would have to be enough. She changed quickly, trading her formal gown for traveling leathers, dark and nondescript. Her hair, usually worn in the elaborate braids befitting an alpha's daughter, she tied back in a simple knot. Sera looked at herself in the mirror one final time. The woman staring back at her looked different already. Harder. More desperate. "You can do this," she told her reflection. "You've survived worse." Except she hadn't. Not really. This was the worst thing she'd ever faced, the complete annihilation of choice. And running felt like both the bravest and most cowardly thing she'd ever done. The hours crawled by like wounded animals. Sera sat in the darkness of her chambers, watching the light fade completely from the sky, listening to the sounds of the estate settling into evening routines. Footsteps in the corridors. Voices calling out instructions. The distant clatter of dishes from the kitchens. At one point, her lady's maid knocked softly, calling that dinner would be served in 30 minutes and did Miss Sera need assistance dressing. "I'm unwell," Sera called back, keeping her voice weak. "Please tell my father I'll take broth in my chambers and retire early. The stress of preparations has given me a headache." There was a pause, then a concerned murmur and retreating footsteps. Sera waited, barely breathing, until she heard the maid's voice echo down the hallway reporting the news. Her father wouldn't come to check on her. He never did. Illness was women's business, beneath his notice unless it threatened the wedding timeline. When the estate bells rang 9 times, Sera moved. She shouldered her pack, checked the dagger at her hip, and slipped out through the balcony door. The gardens below were dark, the guard stationed at the main gates far enough away that they wouldn't see her if she kept to the shadows. She climbed down using the trellis, the same route she'd used as a teenager sneaking out to meet Maya for midnight runs through the forest. Her wolf whined inside her, sensing the danger, but Sera pushed the instinct down. She couldn't shift. Not yet. Not until she was far beyond the estate boundaries. The forest welcomed her like an old friend, familiar and dark and full of hiding places. Sera ran, her wolf-enhanced senses guiding her through paths she knew by heart. The old mining road was 3 miles north, cutting through the territory boundary where Greymore lands met the unclaimed buffer zone before the Hollows. Maya had been specific about the meeting point, the abandoned watchtower where the road forked, exactly at midnight, no earlier. Sera reached the tower with 20 minutes to spare. Her lungs burned from the run, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. She pressed herself against the cold stone wall of the watchtower, hidden in the shadows, and waited. Every sound made her jump. The rustle of wind through leaves. The distant howl of a patrol wolf. The skitter of small animals in the underbrush. Minutes stretched into eternities. Then she heard it. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Sera's wolf went very still inside her, instincts prickling with warning. She'd expected one escort. Maya had said one wolf, someone her brother trusted. 3 figures emerged from the tree line, moving toward the watchtower with casual confidence. Sera squinted, trying to make out faces in the darkness. One of them she recognized immediately, her heart leaping with relief. Maya. Her friend was here, which meant everything was fine, everything was going according to plan. But relief died as quickly as it had sparked to life. Something about Maya's body language was wrong. Too relaxed. Too pleased. And the 2 wolves flanking her, both male, both built like fighters, were grinning. Sera stayed hidden, every instinct screaming at her to stay silent, to observe, to understand what she was seeing before revealing herself. She pressed deeper into the shadows, controlling her breathing, keeping her scent downwind. She should be here any minute, Maya was saying, her voice carrying clearly in the still night air. Sera's always early. Probably already hiding somewhere nearby, scared out of her mind. One of the males laughed, a harsh sound that made Sera's skin crawl. And she really believes you're helping her escape? Just out of the goodness of your heart. Maya's smile was visible even in the darkness, sharp and cruel. She's believed it for 3 months. Poor desperate Sera, so grateful to have one true friend who understands her pain. She mimicked Sera's voice, high and breathy. "Oh Maya, you're the only one who sees me for who I really am. Thank you for saving me." The 3 of them burst into laughter that echoed off the stone walls. Sera felt ice flood her veins, cold spreading from her chest outward until she couldn't feel her fingers. No. This couldn't be happening. Not Maya. Not her oldest friend, the one person she trusted with everything. So we grab her when she shows, the second male said, cracking his knuckles. Take her back to Greymore. Claim we found her trying to run. What's our cut? Maya's eyes gleamed. Alpha Donovan is paying 500 silver for her safe return, plus an additional 300 for proof of who helped her plan the escape. She paused, satisfaction dripping from every word. He wants names. He wants to know exactly who in Greymore can't be trusted. And sweet, naive Sera has been telling me everything. Every wolf she spoke to, every servant who smiled at her sympathetically, everyone who might have even considered helping her. Sera's breath caught. The list. She'd made a mental list of allies, people Maya had carefully drawn out of her over weeks of late-night conversations. People who would now be punished because of her stupidity. 800 silver split 3 ways, the first male mused. And we get to watch Donovan break her spirit when he finds out her best friend sold her out. That's almost worth more than the money. Almost, Maya agreed. But the money definitely helps. Once this alliance goes through and Donovan takes control of Greymore's assets, he's promised me a position in his inner circle. Sera was never going to be anything but a broodmare. I, on the other hand, am going to have actual power. The betrayal was so complete, so total, that for a moment Sera couldn't process it. 3 months of planning. 3 months of hope. All of it had been orchestrated to trap her, to crush any chance of escape, and to tighten Donovan's control over Greymore even further. She had to leave. Now. Had to run before they found her, before this nightmare got worse. Sera took a careful step backward, testing the ground beneath her foot for anything that might make noise. The watchtower had a back entrance, half collapsed but navigable. If she could just. Her boot came down on a loose stone. The scrape of rock on rock sounded like an explosion in the quiet night. All 3 heads snapped toward her hiding spot. Did you hear that? Maya's voice was sharp, alert. Sera didn't wait. She bolted, abandoning stealth for pure speed, her wolf surging forward even though she hadn't shifted. Behind her, she heard shouting, the thunder of pursuit. They were faster than her in human form, trained fighters versus an alpha's daughter who'd spent her life learning politics instead of combat. Don't let her reach the border. Maya's scream cut through the night. If she crosses into the hollows, we lose her. Sera ran harder, branches whipping at her face, roots trying to catch her feet. The border was close, maybe half a mile. If she could just reach neutral territory, pack law said they couldn't follow without cause. She'd be safe. She'd figure out what to do next. She just had to reach the border. But they were gaining. She could hear them closing the distance, their breathing, their footfalls, their wolves snarling with the thrill of the hunt. Sera's lungs screamed for air, her muscles burning, and she knew with cold certainty that she wasn't going to make it. Then she saw him. A figure stood directly in her path, materializing from the shadows like he'd been carved from the darkness itself. Tall, broad-shouldered, radiating power in a way that made her wolf immediately recognize alpha dominance. Sera tried to skid to a stop, but momentum carried her forward. She crashed into him hard enough that she should have bounced off, should have fallen. Instead, iron-strong hands caught her arms, steadying her with effortless strength. Careful, a voice said, deep and rough like gravel and smoke. Running in the dark is dangerous. Sera looked up and her breath stopped. Silver eyes stared down at her, reflecting moonlight like a predator's, set in a face all hard angles and sharp edges. Dark hair fell to his shoulders, and there was something ancient in those eyes, something that spoke of power that answered to no pack, no council, no law. Her wolf knew what he was before her conscious mind caught up. Rogue alpha. Unbound. Dangerous beyond measure. Behind her, Maya and her accomplices burst through the trees, then froze when they saw who was holding Sera. That's the Hollow King, one of the males whispered, fear bleeding into his voice. We should go. Now. Maya hesitated, calculation flickering across her face. She's Greymore property. We have claim. You have nothing. The stranger's voice didn't rise. Didn't need to. It carried absolute authority that made all three of them take an involuntary step backward. Leave. While you still can. They ran. Actually turned and fled back into Greymore territory like their lives depended on it. Which, Sera realized as she felt the barely leashed violence radiating from the man still holding her arms, they probably did. Silence fell over the forest, broken only by Sera's ragged breathing and the distant sound of her former friend's retreat. The stranger was still holding her, not roughly, but firmly enough that she couldn't pull away even if she'd had the strength to try. "Please," Sera whispered, her voice breaking. "Please let me go. I need to run. I need to get away from here before they come back with reinforcements." Those silver eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. "Where exactly were you planning to run?" "The Hollows. I just need to cross the border. Once I'm in neutral territory, they can't legally pursue me." Something that might have been amusement flickered across his harsh features. "The Hollows. Where every rogue and outcast in 3 territories gathers to escape pack politics." He tilted his head slightly. "Do you have any idea what happens to unmated she-wolves alone in the Hollows?" Sera's stomach twisted. She hadn't thought that far ahead, had been so focused on escape that she hadn't considered what came after. "I'll figure it out. I'm strong. I can defend myself." "Against 3 rogues? 5? A dozen?" His grip on her arms shifted, somehow gentler but no less inescapable. "You're running from something." "What?" "That's none of your concern." Sera tried to put steel in her voice, tried to sound like an alpha's daughter instead of a terrified girl whose entire world had just shattered. "I appreciate your intervention, but I need to go. Now." "They called you Greymore property." It wasn't a question, but his tone demanded an answer. Arranged mate bond. Tears burned behind Sera's eyes, fury and humiliation mixing into something too large to contain. "In 48 hours, I'm supposed to bind myself to Alpha Donovan of Ironwood. A treaty marriage. I'd rather die." The stranger was quiet for a long moment, those unnerving silver eyes never leaving her face. Then he said something that changed everything. "What if you didn't have to die? What if there was a third option?" Hope flared, desperate and painful. "What option?" He released her arms but didn't step back, his presence still caging her in. "You need protection. Immediate, unquestionable protection that would nullify any pack claim on you." His head tilted slightly, studying her like she was a puzzle he was deciding whether to solve. "And I need something you have." Sera's breath caught. "What could I possibly have that you need?" "A legitimate claim to Greymore territory." His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing whether instead of pack politics. "I've been trying to negotiate trade access through Greymore lands for 2 years. Your father refuses every proposal I make because I'm rogue, no pack backing, no council approval. But if I had a bound mate with direct bloodline claim to Greymore's alpha lineage..." He let the implication hang. Sera's mind raced. "You want to bind yourself to me. For political access." "I want to offer you protection in exchange for legitimacy," he corrected. "A rogue mate bond supersedes arranged pact treaties. The moment we're bound, Donovan's claim is void. Your father can't force you into a marriage that violates an existing bond. It's the oldest law we have." It was insane. Binding herself to a complete stranger, a rogue alpha with a reputation dangerous enough to make Greymore wolves flee on sight. But the alternative was Donovan. Was being bred like livestock and then discarded. Was spending the rest of her life as a political tool. "What's to stop you from being exactly like Donovan?" Sera asked, forcing herself to meet those silver eyes. "How do I know you won't use me the same way?" The stranger smiled, and it was all sharp edges. "You don't. You have to choose what you fear more. The known evil or the unknown one." Sera thought about Maya's betrayal, about the list of names she'd unknowingly handed over for punishment, about Donovan's cold eyes and colder promises. She thought about the fact that she had nowhere to go, no real allies, and approximately 4 to 6 hours before pack guards dragged her back to a life that would destroy her slowly from the inside out. She reached for the leather pouch at her hip, the one containing everything she owned of value. "I have silver." Gold. It's not much, but it's yours if you do this. All of it. She pulled it free, offering it with shaking hands. I can't give you nothing in return. I need this to be a transaction, something where I have power, not just another situation where I'm property being traded. The stranger looked at the pouch, then back at her face. Something shifted in his expression, too quick to read. You're offering to pay me to bind myself to you. Yes. Sera's voice steadied. This is my choice. My terms. You get legitimacy and trade access. I get freedom from Donovan. We both benefit. And I need it to be that way, not you rescuing a desperate girl out of pity. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull back, and took the pouch from her hands. Weighed it briefly. Then he held it back out to her. Keep your silver. You're going to need it more than I do. But I accept your terms. A binding for protection and legitimacy. Mutual benefit, not ownership. Relief hit so hard Sera's knees nearly buckled. Then we have a deal. We have a deal. He paused, his expression turning serious. But you need to understand what a rogue bond means. It's permanent. No pack council can dissolve it, which is why it protects you. But it also means you can't undo this if you change your mind later. Once we're bound until death. Sera thought about that for exactly 3 seconds. I understand. I accept. Those silver eyes studied her face like he was committing every detail to memory. You're certain? Not just desperate. Certain. I'm certain. And she was. For the first time since her father had announced her engagement to Donovan, Sera felt like she was making a real choice, exercising real power. It might be a choice between bad options, but it was hers. The stranger nodded once, decisive. Then he did something that shocked her. He knelt. Actually dropped to one knee in front of her, his eyes level with hers, putting himself in a position of supplication that no alpha ever adopted. Then I'll make you an oath. My name is Kieran Ashwood. I've been rogue for 7 years and King of the Hollows for 5. I swear on my blood and my wolf that I will protect you from any pack that tries to claim you, that I will honor the terms of this binding, and that I will never force you into anything you don't freely choose. This bond is for your freedom, not my control. Tears spilled down Sera's cheeks before she could stop them. No one had ever knelt for her. No one had ever offered her choice without strings attached. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. Kieran rose in one fluid motion. We need to do this now. Before sunrise, before your pack realizes you're gone and sends out a full hunting party. He glanced around the dark forest. The binding requires a witness. Someone neutral. I thought rogue bonds didn't need pack approval. They don't need council approval. But they do need a witness to make them legally recognized. Otherwise, it's just 2 wolves marking each other in the woods. He pulled something from his pocket, a small carved whistle. He blew once, a sound too high for human ears but clear to her wolf. Within minutes, another figure appeared from the darkness. Female, older, with grey-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. You called, Kieran. I need you to witness a binding. Neutral party, legal recognition. The woman's eyebrows rose as she looked between them. You're binding yourself to a pack wolf? You swore you'd never. She stopped, shook her head. Not my business. You're both consenting adults. Yes, Kieran said. Completely, Sera added. The woman sighed but nodded. Then I'll witness. Let's make it official before I change my mind about getting involved in pack politics. Kieran turned back to Sera, his expression intense. A rogue binding is different from a pack ceremony. It's older. More primal. I'm going to mark you, and you'll feel the bond snap into place. It might hurt. It will definitely be overwhelming. But once it's done, you'll have protection no pack can override. Sera nodded, her heart hammering. I'm ready. Kieran stepped closer, crowding into her space in a way that should have felt threatening but somehow didn't. His hand came up to her throat, fingers ghosting over her pulse point. The mark goes here. Where everyone can see it. Where every wolf will know you're claimed and under protection. Do it, Sera whispered. Kieran's eyes flashed silver, his wolf rising to the surface. He leaned in, his breath warm against her skin, and Sera felt the sharp press of canines against her throat. Not biting yet. Asking permission one final time without words. She tilted her head back, exposing her throat completely, the ultimate submission and the ultimate trust. And he bit. The world exploded into sensation. Pain, yes, but not the agony she'd expected. Instead it felt like lightning, like electricity, like every nerve ending in her body coming alive at once. Heat spread from the mark outward, racing through her veins like wildfire, and with it came something else. Something impossible. Emotions that weren't hers. Fierce determination. Protective fury. And underneath it all, satisfaction so deep it felt like recognition. Like he'd been searching for something and had finally, impossibly, found it. Sera gasped, her hands flying up to grip Kieran's shoulders for balance as the bond locked into place. She could feel him. Not just physically but emotionally, a presence that settled into her chest like a second heartbeat, steady and strong and absolutely certain. When Kieran pulled back, his tongue sweeping over the mark to seal it, Sera was trembling. Not from fear. From the intensity of connection, from the overwhelming awareness of another consciousness intertwined with her own. It's done, the witness said, her voice carrying official weight. I, Elena Crow, neutral party of the Wayward Hollows, bear witness that Kieran Ashwood and Sera of Greymore have formed a rogue-mate bond under the old laws. Let it be recognized by all packs and councils. The binding is complete. Sera touched her throat, feeling the raised mark, still warm and pulsing. Through the bond, she felt Kieran's presence, solid as stone and just as unshakable. I can feel you, she whispered. And I can feel you. Kieran's voice was rougher than before, affected. Fear's fading. Good. But confusion is rising. That's normal. The bond takes time to adjust to. How long have you been able to feel emotions through bonds? Elena asked sharply. Kieran didn't look at her, his eyes still on Sera. This is different. Different how? But Elena's eyes had already widened with understanding. Oh, you didn't just rogue bond her for politics, did you? She's not the time, Elena. Kieran's voice carried warning. Sera looked between them, her mind still reeling. What are you talking about? Nothing that can't wait until you're safe, Kieran said firmly. He turned to Elena. We need to move. Greymore wolves will be searching by dawn, and I don't want Sera anywhere near pack territory when they realize she's gone. Elena nodded. There's a safe house in the Hollows. Warded. No pack wolf can find it without explicit invitation. Take her there. I'll spread word that the Hollow King has taken a mate. By sunrise, every rogue in 3 territories will know not to touch her. Kieran held out his hand to Sera. We need to run. Can you shift? Yes. Sera had been holding her wolf back all night, afraid of losing control. Now she let the transformation ripple through her, bones reshaping, fur sprouting. Her wolf was smaller than Kieran's would be, built for speed rather than power, her coat dark silver in the moonlight. Kieran shifted beside her, and Sera understood immediately why Greymore wolves had fled. His wolf was massive, black as midnight, with those same silver eyes burning with intelligence and barely contained power. This was what a true alpha looked like. Not the political maneuvering of pack councils, but raw dominance made flesh. They ran. The forest blurred around them, Kieran setting a punishing pace that Sera struggled to match. But every time she started to fall behind, she felt something through the bond. Encouragement. Pride in her effort. Adjustment as he slowed fractionally, matching her rhythm instead of demanding she match his. They ran for what felt like hours, crossing from Greymore territory into the unclaimed buffer zone and then into the Hollows proper. The landscape changed, becoming wilder, less manicured. This was land that belonged to no pack, governed by no council. Rogue territory, where the only law was strength and the only rule was survival. But Sera didn't feel afraid. She could feel Kieran through the bond, a constant presence promising protection, and her wolf trusted in a way her human mind was still trying to process. Finally, they reached a small cabin tucked into a dense grove of trees. Warded, just as Elena had said. Sera could feel the magic humming in the air, old protection spells that would hide them from any tracking. Kieran shifted back first, and Sera followed, both of them breathing hard from the run. He moved to the cabin door, pushing it open. Inside. You need rest. Sera stepped through the threshold, her legs trembling with exhaustion now that the adrenaline was fading. The cabin was simple but well maintained. One room with a fireplace, a bed, a small table. Safe. Kieran closed the door behind them, and Sera felt the ward settle, locking them in and the rest of the world out. She turned to face him, this stranger she'd bound herself to, this rogue alpha who'd offered her freedom when everyone else had offered chains. What happens now? Her voice came out smaller than she intended. Kieran studied her for a long moment, those silver eyes unreadable. Now you sleep. You're safe here. No one can find you, and even if they could, they'd have to go through me to get to you. He paused. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the rest. Your father will discover you're gone. Donovan will rage. The politics will get messy. But tonight, you just need to rest. Sera looked at the single bed, then back at him. Where will you sleep? I'll take watch. I don't need much sleep. He moved to the fireplace, starting to build a fire with practiced efficiency. Kieran. She waited until he looked at her. Thank you. For this. For giving me a choice when no one else would. Something flickered in his eyes, too fast to read. You gave me a choice too. You could have just begged for help. Instead, you offered terms. You demanded to be an equal party in this binding. The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. That takes courage. Sera touched the mark on her throat, feeling the warmth there. Through the bond, she could feel his presence, steady and protective. And underneath that, something else. Something he was deliberately keeping locked down tight, shielded from her awareness. What aren't you telling me? She asked quietly. Kieran's hand stilled on the firewood. There are things you'll need to know. Things about me, about the bond, about what this means beyond just politics. He looked at her directly. But tonight isn't the night for those revelations. Tonight, you need safety and rest. Tomorrow, when you're stronger, we'll talk about the rest. Sera wanted to push, wanted to demand answers, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a physical weight. And maybe he was right. Maybe tonight she just needed to feel safe for the first time in months. Okay, she said softly. Tomorrow, we talk. About everything. About everything, Kieran agreed. Sera moved to the bed, sitting on the edge, her entire body aching from the run and the emotional devastation of the night. Maya's betrayal still burned, a raw wound she wasn't ready to examine. She'd trusted her best friend with everything, and that trust had been weaponized against her. But beneath the pain, there was something else. Relief. Fierce, overwhelming relief that she'd escaped. That she wasn't going to be bound to Donovan. That she'd found a way out, even if that way was binding herself to a dangerous rogue alpha she barely knew. Through the bond, she felt Kieran's emotions shift. The protective fury easing slightly, replaced by something that felt almost like contentment. Like her relief brought him satisfaction. The bond, Sera said quietly. It lets you feel what I'm feeling. Yes. Kieran had the fire going now, warmth beginning to fill the small cabin. And you can feel me, if you pay attention. It goes both ways. Sera closed her eyes, focusing inward, following that thread of connection. And there it was. Kieran's presence, complex and layered. Protectiveness, yes. But also something fierce and possessive that should have frightened her and somehow didn't. And buried even deeper, carefully hidden, something that felt like wonder. You're shielding something from me, Sera said. Something big. Kieran's jaw tightened. Yes. Will you tell me tomorrow? Yes. He moved to sit in the chair near the fire, positioning himself between her and the door. Guardian position. I promise. Tomorrow, I'll tell you everything. But tonight, Just sleep. You're safe here, Sera. I swear it. Sera believed him. She didn't know why, didn't know if it was the bond or instinct or just desperate hope, but she believed him completely. She lay back on the bed, not bothering to undress, and closed her eyes. Through the bond, she felt Kieran settle into watchful alertness, his wolf on guard even as his human body rested. And for the first time in months, Sera let herself drift into sleep without fear of what tomorrow would bring. She woke to sunlight streaming through the cabin window and the smell of something cooking. Sera sat up slowly, her body stiff from yesterday's run, her hand immediately going to the mark on her throat. It was real. Everything that had happened was real. Kieran was at the small stove, somehow producing what looked like a decent breakfast from the cabin's limited supplies. He glanced over as she stirred. You slept for 12 hours. 12. Sera looked at the light. Late morning, then. My father. Discovered you were gone approximately 10 hours ago, Kieran finished calmly. Elena sent word. Greymore is in chaos. Donovan's furious. Search parties are combing the territory. He brought over a plate of eggs and bread. Eat. You need your strength. Sera took the plate automatically, her mind racing. They'll come here. They'll find us. They can't. The wards on this cabin are older than any pack in this region. No wolf can track through them, no matter how skilled. Kieran sat across from her, his own plate untouched. You're safe, Sera. That's not changing. She forced herself to eat, though her stomach churned with anxiety. You said you'd explain. About the bond, about what you're hiding. Kieran was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes studying her with that same intense focus from the night before. Finally, he spoke. Rogue bonds are rare. Most rogues don't bind themselves because it creates a weakness, a vulnerability. But there's something rarer than a rogue bond. He paused. There's such a thing as a true mate bond. Wolves destined for each other, chosen by fate or the moon goddess or whatever power governs these things. When true mates meet, there's recognition. Instant, undeniable, overwhelming. Sera's heart started to pound. You're saying? I'm saying that when you crashed into me last night, I felt that recognition. Kieran's voice was steady, but she could feel the tension in him through the bond. You're my true mate, Sera. Not just a political binding. The actual, fated, one person in existence meant for me. I've been rogue for 7 years, and I've been searching for you without even knowing what I was searching for. The world tilted. But I didn't feel it. When we met, I was desperate and scared, but I didn't feel any recognition. Because you were human-formed and in full panic mode, Kieran said gently. Your wolf was locked down, all your instincts suppressed. You were so focused on survival that you couldn't feel anything else. But I felt it. The moment I touched you, I knew. Sera remembered the moment, the way he'd caught her, the way his hands had been so careful despite his obvious strength. You knew I was your true mate, and you still let me make the choice. You didn't tell me. You let me think it was just a political arrangement. Because I needed you to choose freely, Kieran said. If I'd told you we were true mates, you might have felt obligated or manipulated. Or worse, you might have thought I was lying to trap you. I needed you to decide for yourself, based on what you needed, not on some cosmic destiny you had no control over. Through the bond, Sera could feel the truth of his words. The fierce need to give her agency, to let her have power in a situation where she'd been powerless. So you let me offer you silver to buy you as a husband. A slight smile tugged at Kieran's mouth. You have no idea how much that meant to me. That you were willing to trade everything you owned for freedom. That you demanded terms. That you refused to be property. His expression grew serious again. I would have protected you regardless, true mate or not. But knowing you were mine and watching you fight for your own autonomy, that was the moment I knew I'd made the right choice going rogue all those years ago. Because pack politics never would have let me have you. Your father would never have negotiated with a rogue. And Donovan would never have stepped aside. Sera's mind was reeling. How long have you been planning to pursue access to Greymore? 2 years of formal negotiations. Kieran's eyes glinted. 7 years of watching from the shadows, waiting for the right opportunity. I've known about you since you were 19. Your father paraded you at every regional council meeting, showing off his perfect daughter to potential political matches. You've known about me for 7 years. I knew of you. I didn't know you were mine until last night. He leaned forward slightly. And now I need to know something from you. Now that you know the truth, now that you understand this isn't just a political binding but an actual mate bond, do you regret your choice? Sera examined her feelings carefully. Shock? Yes. Confusion? Absolutely. But regret? She thought about Donovan's cold promises. Maya's betrayal. Her father's casual willingness to sell her for political advantage. And she thought about Kieran kneeling before her, offering oath and protection without demanding anything in return. No, she said slowly. I don't regret it. I'm overwhelmed. But not regretful. Relief pulsed through the bond so strongly it made her gasp. Kieran felt it too, his expression shifting to something almost vulnerable. You can feel that. Your emotions are bleeding through, Sera said. You were afraid I'd reject the bond. Terrified, he admitted. True mate bonds are supposed to be instant recognition for both wolves. The fact that you didn't feel it made me worry that maybe I'd imagined it, or that the bond was one-sided somehow. That would have been. He trailed off, shaking his head. Devastating, Sera finished quietly. Through the bond, she could feel the depth of his relief, and underneath it, the fierceness of his protectiveness. This wasn't just political posturing. This was a wolf who'd found his other half and would burn the world to keep her safe. I can feel you now, she said. Not just emotions, but presence. Like you're always there, in the back of my mind. That's the mate bond settling. It'll get stronger over time. Eventually, we'll be able to communicate mind to mind if we're close enough. Feel each other's physical sensations. Share strength in battle. Kieran paused. It's the most intimate connection two wolves can have. Intimate. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Sera looked at this man, this stranger who was apparently her destined mate, and tried to reconcile the cosmic significance with the practical reality. What happens now? Politically, I mean. Donovan won't just accept that his treaty bride ran off and bound herself to someone else. No, he won't. Kieran's expression hardened. Which is why we need to move carefully. Right now, you're protected by the rogue bond. But Greymore is going to be in political turmoil, and Donovan is going to be looking for any excuse to claim you were coerced or kidnapped. Was I? Sera asked bluntly. You said you've been watching me for 7 years. Did you orchestrate last night somehow? The meeting with Maya, the timing. Kieran met her eyes directly. No. I've been negotiating trade access through legitimate channels for 2 years. I had no idea you were planning to run, and I definitely didn't know your friend was going to betray you. Last night, I was patrolling the border because there'd been reports of Ironwood scouts in neutral territory, and I wanted to know what Donovan was planning. When I saw you running from 3 wolves, I intervened. The rest was your choice. Sera believed him. She could feel the truth through the bond, solid and unshakable. What about Maya? She's going to tell Donovan that I ran into someone. That there was a wolf who interfered. Let her tell him. Kieran's smile was sharp. Donovan already knows I exist. He knows I've been trying to negotiate with Greymore. When he finds out you've bound yourself to me, he's going to understand exactly what that means politically. Which is that he has no claim on you. That any alliance with Greymore through marriage is void. And that if he tries to take you by force, he'll have to go through not just me, but every rogue in the Hollows who follows my lead. Kieran's eyes gleamed silver. I'm the Hollow King, Sera. I don't rule through pack councils or political maneuvering. I rule through strength. And every wolf in neutral territory knows that crossing me is a death sentence. The casual confidence in his voice should have been arrogant. Instead, it was simply factual. This was a wolf who knew his power and didn't need to prove it through posturing. My father will try to void the bond, Sera said. He'll claim I was coerced or manipulated. He'll say I was underage or not in my right mind. You're 23. Well past legal bonding age. And we had a neutral witness. Kieran leaned back in his chair. Elena Crow is respected in every territory precisely because she refuses to take sides in pack politics. Her testimony is ironclad. Your father can rage all he wants, but the bond is legal and permanent. Sera touched the mark on her throat again, feeling its warmth. I'm really free of him. Of all of them. You're free, Kieran confirmed. But freedom comes with complications. Greymore is going to cut you off completely. Your bloodline claim to the Alpha line still exists, but your father is likely to disown you publicly to save face. That means no inheritance, no pack support, no family connections. I don't care. And Sera realized she meant it. The pack that had been willing to sell her to Donovan didn't deserve her loyalty. What about you? What do you get out of this besides a mate you have to protect from political fallout? Kieran's expression softened slightly. I get you. That's more than enough. But practically speaking, having a mate with Greymore bloodline claim gives me legitimacy I've never had as a rogue. It means I can negotiate with other packs from a position of recognized authority instead of as an outsider. It opens trade routes, political connections, alliances. So we both benefit, Sera said slowly. Just like I wanted. Equal exchange, not ownership. Equal exchange, Kieran agreed. Though I'll admit, the scales are heavily tipped in my favor. I got my true mate and political legitimacy. You got protection and freedom, but you also got bound to a rogue alpha who lives in neutral territory and operates outside pack law. That's not exactly a fairy tale ending. Sera looked around the small cabin, felt the warmth of the fire and the safety of the wards, felt Kieran's presence through the bond, steady and protective. I don't need a fairy tale. I just needed a choice. And you gave me that. Through the bond, she felt Kieran's response. Pride, fierce and warm. Satisfaction that ran bone deep. And something else, something that felt like the beginning of hope that maybe, possibly, this impossible situation could become something real. A sharp knock on the door shattered the moment. Kieran was on his feet instantly, positioning himself between Sera and the door, his entire body language shifting to predatory alertness. It's Elena, a familiar voice called. I have news, and you're not going to like it. Kieran opened the door carefully, his posture still guarded. Elena stepped inside, her expression grim. She looked at Sera, then at Kieran, then sighed. Donovan's challenging the bond. On what grounds? Kieran's voice was dangerously quiet. His claiming coercion. Says that Sera was fleeing from wolves who were chasing her, that she was traumatized and in fear for her life, and that any agreement she made under those circumstances can't be considered freely given consent. Elena crossed her arms. He's demanding a formal hearing before the regional council. If they rule in his favor, the bond can be declared void, and Sera would be returned to Greymore custody pending the original treaty marriage. Ice flooded Sera's veins. They can do that? They can just dissolve a mate bond. Technically, no, Elena said. But if they rule that the bond was formed under coercion, they can impose penalties and political sanctions that would make it impossible for Kieran to protect you. They could declare you both rogue outlaws, strip any legitimacy from the binding, and give Donovan legal grounds to pursue you by force. When is this hearing? Kieran asked. 3 days. They're convening in neutral territory, the old council hall at Crossroads. Elena looked between them. You both have to attend. If you don't show, they'll rule in Donovan's favor by default. Sera's hands were shaking. So I have to stand in front of a council and convince them that binding myself to a complete stranger while running for my life was a free choice. Essentially, yes. Elena's expression was sympathetic. I'll testify as witness. But you're going to need more than that. You're going to need to prove that you understood what you were doing, that you weren't manipulated or coerced, and that the bond was entered into with full knowledge and consent. That's not going to be easy, Kieran said quietly. Especially since we both know Donovan is going to paint this as a rogue alpha taking advantage of a frightened pack wolf. There's something else, Elena said reluctantly. Your father has made a public statement. He's disowned you, Sera. Formally and completely. He's claiming you brought shame on the Greymore name by running from a legitimate treaty marriage and binding yourself to a rogue. He says you're no longer his daughter and that he won't be held responsible for any of your actions or debts. The words hit like physical blows. Sera had expected it, had known her father would react this way, but hearing it confirmed still hurt. So I have nothing. No pack, no family, no claim to anything. You have me, Kieran said firmly. That's not nothing. It is if the council rules our bond invalid. Sera looked at him, feeling panic rising. If they void the bond, what happens to me? Do I go back to Greymore? To Donovan? That won't happen. Kieran's voice carried absolute certainty. I won't let it happen. You might not have a choice, Elena said gently. If the council rules against you and you refuse to comply, they could declare you outlaw. That means no pack in the region would be allowed to shelter you, trade with you, or acknowledge your authority. You'd be completely isolated. I've been isolated before, Kieran said. I can handle it. But can she? Elena gestured to Sera. She's pack-born, pack-raised. Being outlaw means she can never return to any pack territory, can never see anyone from her old life, can never have the protection and structure she's known her entire existence. It's a hard life, Kieran. Even for rogues. Sera looked at Kieran, seeing the tension in his jaw, the fury burning in his silver eyes. Through the bond, she could feel his rage at the situation, his determination to protect her, and underneath it all, a fear he was trying to hide. Fear that the council would take her from him. Fear that he'd finally found his true mate only to have pack politics rip her away. We'll fight it, Sera said, surprised by the strength in her own voice. We go to this hearing, we present our case, and we make them understand that this was my choice. I won't let Donovan win. I won't let them void a bond that was freely given. Kieran looked at her, something like awe flickering across his features. You're sure? I'm sure. And Sera realized she was. Maya's betrayal had taught her exactly what pack loyalty was worth. Her father's disowning had severed any remaining ties to Greymore. She had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. I chose you, Kieran. I chose this bond. And I'm not going to let some council tell me that my choice doesn't matter. Through the bond, Kieran's emotions surged. Pride, fierce and bright. Gratitude that ran deeper than words. And that possessive protectiveness that made Sera's wolf settle in satisfaction. This was what a true mate felt like. Not ownership, but partnership. Not control, but mutual strength. Then we fight, Kieran said. Together. Elena nodded slowly. I'll spread word through the hollows. There are rogues who owe Kieran favors, wolves who respect his authority. If this turns into a political battle, you'll need allies. I'll see who I can rally. Thank you, Sera said quietly. Elena smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get messy. Donovan has money, pack backing, and council connections. You have a rogue alpha and a disowned pack wolf. The odds aren't in your favor. We've beaten worse odds, Kieran said. After Elena left, silence fell over the cabin again. Sera sat back down at the table, her mind racing through everything that had just been dropped on them. 3 days until a hearing that would determine her entire future. 3 days to prepare a defense against a challenge that could invalidate the only protection she had. Hey. Kieran's voice was soft. He'd moved to crouch in front of her, his hands resting lightly on her knees. Look at me. Sera met his silver eyes, seeing the intensity there, the absolute determination. We're going to win this, Kieran said. I don't care what the council says, what Donovan claims, or what your father testifies. You are my mate. That bond is real, and no political maneuvering is going to break it. Do you believe me? Sera searched his face, feeling the truth resonating through their connection. I believe you. Good. He stood, pulling her up with him. Because I need you to understand something. 7 years ago, I went rogue because I refused to let pack politics dictate my life. I walked away from everything, family, territory, status, because I believed wolves should be free to make their own choices. I built the Hollows into a refuge for wolves who didn't fit into pack structures. And now I found you, my true mate, who ran from an arranged marriage because you refused to be owned. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle despite the strength in them. This fight we're about to have? It's not just about protecting our bond. It's about proving that choice matters more than politics. That free will is worth fighting for. And we're going to prove it together. Sera felt tears prick her eyes, but they weren't tears of fear. They were tears of relief, of finding someone who understood exactly what she'd been fighting for. I've never had anyone fight for my right to choose before. Then it's about time someone did. Kieran's thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. You gave me everything last night when you demanded equal terms instead of begging for rescue. You showed me that my mate is a wolf who stands on her own, who fights for her own autonomy. Now let me show you what it means to have a mate who will burn the world to protect your right to choose. The kiss was inevitable. Sera rose up on her toes at the same moment Kieran lowered his head, their lips meeting in a collision that was equal parts desperation and need and recognition. This wasn't like the claiming bite, all primal instinct and bond-forging power. This was softer, deeper, a conscious choice to connect beyond the demands of destiny. Kieran's hand stayed gentle on her face even as the kiss deepened, even as Sera's fingers threaded into his hair and pulled him closer. Through the bond, she felt his control, the way he was holding himself back, giving her space to set the pace despite the hunger she could feel building in him. Sera pulled back slightly, breathing hard. You're holding back. You've had a traumatic 24 hours, Kieran said, his voice rough. I'm not going to overwhelm you. What if I want to be overwhelmed? The words came out before Sera could second-guess them. What if I want to feel something other than fear and betrayal and political maneuvering? What if I just want to feel my mate? Kieran's eyes darkened, silver bleeding to almost black. Sera. You said this was my choice, Sera interrupted. You said you'd honor what I freely choose. So I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. Not because of the bond, not because of politics, but because I want to. Something in Kieran broke loose. His control fractured, and suddenly he was kissing her like a man starved, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist and pulled her flush against him. Sera gasped at the intensity, at the heat of his body pressed against hers, at the way every nerve ending seemed to light up in response. They stumbled backward until Sera's back hit the cabin wall, Kieran's solid form caging her in without making her feel trapped. This was what she'd wanted, what some part of her had been craving since the moment the bond snapped into place. Connection. Certainty. The overwhelming presence of her mate making the rest of the world disappear. Kieran's mouth left hers to trail down her jaw, finding the mark he'd left on her throat. When his tongue swept over it, Sera's knees actually buckled. The sensation was electric, pleasure spiking through the bond and feeding back on itself until she couldn't tell where her response ended and his began. Feel that. Kieran's voice was rough against her skin. That's the mate bond. Every touch, every sensation, it echoes between us. Gets stronger the more we connect. Don't stop, Sera managed, her hands fisting in his shirt. Please don't stop. Kieran pulled back just enough to look at her, and Sera saw the question in his eyes despite the hunger. Making sure. Always making sure she was certain. I'm sure, she said firmly. I choose this. I choose you. His smile was pure heat before his mouth found hers again, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. Just the overwhelming intensity of two souls recognizing each other and demanding more. Time became meaningless. There was only sensation, connection, the bond pulling them together with a force that felt inevitable and chosen all at once. Kieran was careful even in his passion, his strength leashed but present, letting Sera feel protected without being controlled. And Sera gave herself over to it, to him, to the mate bond that had formed from a desperate bargain and transformed into something real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together, Sera felt steadier than she had since her father first announced her engagement to Donovan. She felt centered. Strong. Like she'd found a piece of herself she hadn't known was missing. 3 days, Kieran said quietly. We have 3 days to prepare for a hearing that will decide everything. Then we'd better make them count, Sera replied. Through the bond, she felt his response. Determination mixed with fierce pride. Her mate was a fighter, a king in his own right, and he'd chosen to kneel before her and offer protection. Now it was her turn to stand beside him and prove they were worth fighting for. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Elena returned with updates on council procedures and the wolves who would be presiding over the hearing. Kieran coached Sera on how to present their case, what questions to expect, how to handle Donovan's inevitable attempts to twist her words. "He's going to paint you as a frightened victim," Kieran said on the second day as they reviewed her testimony again. "He's going to claim I took advantage of your fear." "Then I'll tell them the truth," Sera said firmly. "That I offered you terms. That I demanded equal exchange. That I was the one who made the proposal. They're going to ask why you trusted a complete stranger over your own pack." Sera's expression hardened. "Because my own pack was selling me to a man who promised to use me for breeding and then discard me. Because my best friend betrayed me for silver. Because trusting a stranger who offered me choice was better than trusting the wolves I'd known my whole life who'd proven they saw me as property." Kieran studied her for a long moment. "You've gotten stronger." "I've gotten angry," Sera corrected. "There's a difference. I spent my whole life being the obedient daughter, the perfect pack wolf. And where did it get me? Engaged to a man who saw me as livestock. Betrayed by the friend I trusted most. Disowned by my father." She met Kieran's eyes directly. "I'm done being what everyone else wants me to be. If the council wants to void our bond, they're going to have to hear exactly why I chose it in the first place." Through the bond, Kieran's pride blazed bright. "That's my mate." The night before the hearing, Sera couldn't sleep. She lay in the cabin bed, Kieran's solid presence beside her, both of them too keyed up to rest despite knowing they needed their strength. Finally, Sera gave up on sleep and turned to face him in the darkness. "What if we lose?" she asked quietly. Kieran's hand found hers beneath the blankets, fingers lacing together. "Then we run. We go so far into rogue territory that no pack council can touch us. We build a life in the hollows where their laws don't reach. That's not the life you want." "I want you," Kieran said simply. "Everything else is negotiable." Sera squeezed his hand. "I don't want you to lose everything because of me. You're not taking anything from me." Kieran shifted to face her fully, his silver eyes visible even in the dim light. "You're giving me something I never thought I'd have. A true mate. A partner who fights for her own autonomy. A reason to build something permanent instead of just surviving." His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. "Whatever the council decides tomorrow, we'll face it together. That's what mates do." "Together," Sera echoed, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. They fell asleep like that, hands clasped, bond pulsing steady between them, gathering strength for the battle ahead. The council hall at Crossroads was exactly as imposing as Sera had feared. Old stone, heavy wooden doors, and an air of ancient authority that made her wolf want to submit instinctively. She forced herself to stand tall as she and Kieran approached, Elena walking slightly behind them as their witness. The hall was already full. Donovan sat at one of the tables, flanked by advisors and looking every inch the powerful alpha. Sera's father was there too, his expression cold and closed off when his eyes briefly met hers before looking away. And scattered throughout the room were other pack alphas, council members, wolves whose political power would decide her fate. The presiding councillor was an ancient she-wolf named Meredith Frost, her grey hair worn in traditional braids, her eyes sharp as flint. She called the hearing to order with a voice that carried absolute authority. "We are gathered to review the challenge brought by Alpha Donovan of Ironwood regarding the mate bond between Kieran Ashwood of the Wayward Hollows and Sera, formerly of Greymore." Meredith's gaze swept the room. "Alpha Donovan claims the bond was formed under coercion and should be declared void. Kieran Ashwood and Sera assert the bond was freely chosen. We will hear testimony from all parties and render judgment according to pack law and rogue tradition." Donovan stood first, his presentation polished and persuasive. He painted a picture of a frightened young wolf fleeing from a minor misunderstanding, being chased by concerned pack members trying to bring her safely home, and stumbling into the arms of a rogue alpha who took advantage of her vulnerable state to forge a bond that gave him political legitimacy he couldn't gain through legitimate means. "She was in fear for her life," Donovan said, his voice carrying perfectly calibrated concern. "She was running from wolves she believed wanted to harm her. In that state of panic, she couldn't possibly give informed consent to a permanent mate bond. Any agreement made under such duress should be considered invalid." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the council. Sera's hands clenched into fists beneath the table. Then it was Kieran's turn. He stood with the easy confidence of a wolf who'd never needed council approval to know his own worth. "I did not coerce Sera into anything," he said calmly. "She ran into me while fleeing from actual danger. Wolves who were planning to turn her over to Alpha Donovan against her will for profit. I offered protection. She offered terms. We negotiated like equals, and she made a choice with full knowledge of what she was agreeing to." "A choice made in desperation is not a free choice," Donovan countered. "Then every pack alliance marriage is invalid," Kieran shot back. "Or does desperation only negate consent when it benefits your political agenda?" The council erupted in arguments, voices rising in debate. Meredith called for order, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We will hear from Sera herself. Young wolf, approach." Sera stood on shaking legs and moved to the center of the hall, feeling every eye in the room focused on her. Meredith studied her with those sharp eyes. "Tell us, in your own words, what happened the night you formed this bond. And remember, you are under oath before the council. Lying will result in immediate penalties." Sera took a deep breath, feeling Kieran's presence through the bond, steady and supportive. "I was running from Greymore because I was engaged against my will to Alpha Donovan. The night of my planned escape, I discovered that my closest friend had been planning to betray me, to turn me over to Donovan for payment." She raised her voice, making sure it carried. "I heard her discussing how she'd manipulated me for months, gathering information about anyone in Greymore who might help me, so she could turn those names over to Donovan for punishment." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Donovan's expression remained neutral, but Sera saw the slight tightening around his eyes. "I ran," Sera continued. "And yes, I was afraid. But I wasn't afraid of Kieran. I was afraid of being dragged back to a marriage where I'd been promised I'd be used for breeding and then discarded. I was afraid of living the rest of my life as property instead of a person." She turned to look directly at Donovan. "And when I met Kieran, he didn't take advantage of my fear. He gave me a choice. He explained exactly what a rogue bond would mean, that it was permanent, that it would protect me from pack claims. And I chose it. I chose him. Not because I was desperate, but because he was the first wolf who offered me real autonomy." "You offered him payment," Meredith said. "Why?" "Because I needed it to be a transaction between equals," Sera said firmly. "I needed to have power in the situation, not just be another rescued damsel. I offered him everything I owned in exchange for protection and political binding. He accepted my terms. That's not coercion. That's negotiation." "Did you know he was your true mate when you made this offer?" Meredith asked. Sera hesitated. "No. I was too focused on survival to feel the mate bond recognition. Kieran felt it, but he didn't tell me because he wanted me to choose freely, without feeling obligated by destiny." More murmurs through the crowd. Meredith's expression was unreadable. "And when you discovered you'd bound yourself to your true mate?" "I felt relief," Sera said honestly. "Because it meant the choice I'd made in desperation turned out to be the right choice for reasons I couldn't have known. But even if we weren't true mates, I wouldn't regret the bond. Kieran has given me more respect and autonomy in 3 days than I had in 23 years in Greymore." "Strong words," Meredith said. "Are you truly claiming your pack showed you no respect?" "I'm claiming my pack saw me as a political asset to be traded," Sera said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. "My father arranged my marriage without asking what I wanted. My friend betrayed me for silver. And Alpha Donovan," she turned to face him again, "told me directly that after I'd given him 3 sons, I could retire alone to a country estate while he sought comfort elsewhere. So no, counselor. My pack did not show me respect. They showed me exactly how much my choices mattered to them. Which is why I chose to leave." The hall was silent now, every wolf transfixed by her words. Sera saw her father's face, pale and drawn, saw the ripple of discomfort through the pack alphas who'd arranged similar marriages for their own daughters. "Alpha Donovan," Meredith said coldly, "did you make such a promise to this young wolf?" Donovan's jaw tightened. "It was a private conversation. And my words may have been misinterpreted. Did you or did you not tell her she would be used for breeding and then set aside?" Silence stretched. Then, reluctantly, "I may have suggested that after producing heirs, she would have freedom to pursue her own interests separately from my pack duties." That's a very diplomatic way of saying you plan to use her and discard her, Kieran said, his voice deadly quiet. That's standard practice in political marriages, Donovan shot back. She knew what she was agreeing to. I didn't agree to anything, Sera said. My father agreed. I was never asked. Meredith's expression had gone from neutral to coldly furious. Let me be clear on what I'm hearing. Alpha Donovan arranged a treaty marriage with a young wolf who was never consulted about her own bonding. He made promises that would amount to using her as breeding stock. When she attempted to escape this arrangement, she was betrayed by a trusted friend working in Alpha Donovan's employ. And when she managed to form a legitimate mate bond with another wolf to escape this situation, Alpha Donovan challenged that bond as coercive. She leaned forward. Is that an accurate summary? Donovan's advisors were whispering frantically. The treaty was legitimate. The treaty was between you and her father, Meredith interrupted. Not between you and her. And pack law is clear. Forced matings are forbidden. If the young wolf did not consent freely to the arrangement, the treaty itself was invalid from the start. She didn't refuse, Donovan argued. She never formally objected. Because she was terrified, Sera cut in. Because I was raised to be obedient, to serve pack interests. Because I thought I had no choice. Until Kieran showed me I did. Meredith looked at Elena. Neutral witness. Describe what you observed during the bonding. Elena stood, her voice carrying clearly. I witnessed Kieran Ashwood and Sera negotiate terms like equals. She offered payment for protection. He explained the permanence and implications of a rogue bond. She explicitly consented, multiple times, to the bonding. There was no coercion, no manipulation, no taking advantage. Just two wolves making a choice to bind themselves according to old laws. And the true mate recognition? Meredith asked. Kieran felt it immediately, Elena said. But he honored Sera's need to choose freely by not revealing it until after the bond was formed. That shows restraint, not manipulation. Meredith sat back in her chair, her eyes moving between Sera and Kieran, then to Donovan. I have heard enough. This council will deliberate. The wait was agonizing. Sera sat beside Kieran, their hands clasped beneath the table, bond pulsing between them with shared anxiety. Around them, the hall buzzed with whispered conversations, speculation, political maneuvering. Finally, after what felt like hours, Meredith called for order. The council has reached a decision. Sera's heart hammered so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, this council finds that the mate bond between Kieran Ashwood and Sera was formed with full consent and according to legitimate rogue tradition. The bond is declared valid and permanent. Meredith's gaze turned to Donovan. Furthermore, we find that the original treaty marriage was arranged without proper consent from the young wolf in question, making it invalid under current pack law. Alpha Donovan's challenge is denied. Relief hit like a physical wave. Sera sagged in her chair, tears streaming down her face. Through the bond, she felt Kieran's fierce triumph, his protective satisfaction that his mate was safe. But Meredith wasn't done. Additionally, this council strongly recommends that all packs review their practices regarding arranged matings. The old ways of trading daughters like property must end. Pack law will be updated to require explicit, documented consent from both parties before any betrothal agreement is considered valid. The hall erupted in arguments, but Sera barely heard them. She turned to Kieran, seeing her own relief reflected in his silver eyes. We won. You won, Kieran corrected softly. You stood up there and told them exactly why your choice mattered. You changed policy, Sera. For every pack wolf who comes after you. Through the bond, Sera felt his pride, his awe, his absolute certainty that she was the strongest wolf he'd ever met. And for the first time in her life, she believed it too. Donovan stormed out of the hall, his alliance dreams shattered. Sera's father approached slowly, hesitantly. Sera, he started. Don't, she said quietly. You made your choice when you disowned me. I don't need your apologies or your attempts to reconcile now that the council sided with me. He flinched. I was trying to do what was best for the pack. You were trying to do what was best for your political position, Sera corrected. And you sacrificed your daughter to do it. Live with that choice, father. Because I'm living with mine, and I'm happy with the wolf I chose. She turned away from him, taking Kieran's offered hand, and walked out of the council hall as a free wolf. Outside, Elena was waiting, a rare smile on her face. You did it. Both of you. We did it, Sera agreed. She looked at Kieran, this rogue king who'd given her choice when everyone else had offered chains. What happens now? Kieran's smile was slow and warm. Now? We go home. We build a life in the hollows. We prove that two wolves who choose each other can be stronger than any pack alliance forced through politics. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. We live free, together. Together. The word resonated through the bond, promise, and commitment and choice all wrapped into one. As they walked away from the council hall, away from pack politics and forced alliances, Sera felt something she'd never experienced before. Complete, absolute freedom. Not running from something, but walking toward something. Toward a future she chose, with a mate who respected her autonomy as much as he cherished their bond. I love you, she said suddenly, the words spilling out before she could second-guess them. Kieran stopped walking, turning to face her fully, those silver eyes blazing with emotion. I've loved you since the moment you crashed into me and demanded equal terms instead of begging for rescue. I've loved you through every moment of this fight. And I'll love you for the rest of our lives. He kissed her there in the street, not caring who saw, not caring about politics or councils or pack opinions. Just two wolves who'd found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk into the light together. When they finally broke apart, Sera smiled. Take me home. Home, Kieran agreed. And hand in hand, the Hollow King and his freely chosen queen walked toward their future, leaving the past behind where it belonged.